Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well as we begin the fall semester. My name is Christopher Hammond. I'm a rising sophomore from Louisville, Kentucky. I'm a history major, education minor, and one day I hope to aspire to be a high school history teacher. So this summer I was able to do research with Dr. Sarah Murray, who is an education professor here at Center. Together, her and I, along with 6 to 8 other students, conducted research on the effects of COVID-19 on the education system. Each student or group of students kind of had their own little thing or their own little aspect about that overall research to specifically focus on. And my specific one was the conflict of student schooling and home life. So more specifically, how returning home while doing virtual learning has affected students' ability to fully, engage and participate in online learning. So for some context, as we all know, in March, the COVID-19 pandemic took the world by storm, sent everybody home. Most students were not accustomed to virtual learning when they went home. No, personally, I've never done online schooling. Most students haven't. In addition, this was taking place during a pandemic, so a lot of people were very stressed out. They weren't really focused on school as much. We've never gone through this during our lifetimes before. And a lot of people were really confused. They didn't know what was going to happen in the upcoming months and years, and they were just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen, taking it day by day or month by month. And so a lot of questions, or one big question that students were wondering was, how is students returning home and elsewhere going to affect their ability to fully participate and engage in virtual learning, which was my question I said earlier. Because like I said, in the midst of a pandemic, going home, doing virtual learning, it's all very new to them. So they were wondering how it was going to affect their ability to do that. So let's talk about virtual learning for a little bit. So virtual learning has been around for many years. It's kind of controversial. Some people think it's effective, some people think it's not. Lots of research has been done about it in the past years, especially as the internet gets more and more popular and more accessible. A lot of more institutions are doing it as a form of education. Here's one quote I like. It says, "Educators and policymakers, separately and together, must carefully examine where technology can help. Integrating technology into education must be evolutionary." This is a quote I really like a lot because it kind of talks about the intersection between education and policy making. And even though this is from 2002, it's very applicable nowadays because with virtual learning happening virtually all across the country and world, educators know what their students want. Policymakers are also making the laws, so they must work together to find a solution that best fits their students' needs. Methods. So I sent a survey to around 30 college students. It had 10 questions on it, 9 were multiple choice, 1 was fill in your own answer, but it was how old you are. The first part of it was more focused on demographic questions, and the last part of it was more focused on your people's personal experience with COVID-19 and returning home doing virtual learning. After the survey, I conducted a 20 to 30-minute Zoom interview over Zoom. It was just more in depth about the research and more in depth about their experience with virtual learning while going back home. It also asked how they believed professors could better accommodate them in the future, especially if it does happen this fall, if we do have to go home and do virtual learning. And now the survey questions. So there were 9 survey questions. The first one was, what is your age? The second one is, what is your rising grade level? The third one is, what is your gender? The fourth one is, what is your ethnicity? The fifth one is, when moving to an online format, where did you complete the remainder of your classes? The sixth one is, in what format were the majority of your classes? The seventh one was, do you think being at home has affected your ability to fully participate in school? The eighth one was, do you think professors have been trying their best to accommodate you and other students? And the ninth one is, do you think that moving to an online form has affected you emotionally? So in terms of the results for the demographic questions, 2 of the students that participated, and as I said earlier, I only had 22 students participate out of the 30. The other 8 decided to drop out for unknown reasons. Their ages were 18, and then 19, 7 of them were 19, and then 9 of them were 20, so that was the most common age, and then 4 of the participants were 21. There were 8 rising sophomores, 10 rising juniors, and 4 rising seniors, and like I said again, these are all college students. It was split 50-50 between males and females, 11 male students, 11 female students. And then in terms of race and ethnicities, 10 students identified as Caucasian, 9 students identified as Hispanic or Latinx, 1 student identified as Black or African American, 1 student identified as Asian or Pacific Islander, and 1 student identified as other. So in terms of the research question results, the ones more about their personal experiences, 21 students returned home and 1 student stayed with friends, so most students went back home. 2 students had all live classes, 6 students had all pre-recorded classes, and 14 students had a mixture of both. So overwhelmingly, most students had some synchronous, some asynchronous. In terms of whether they thought being at home affected their ability to focus and participate, 13 of them strongly agreed with that statement, 6 of them agreed, and then 3 of them somewhat agreed. So the overwhelming majority was strongly agreed. In terms of whether or not they thought professors were trying their best to accommodate them, 6 students strongly agreed, 7 students agreed, and 9 students somewhat agreed. And so those kind of split evenly a little bit between the 3 questions, or the 3 answers, but most students thought that somewhat the professors were trying to accommodate. And then in terms of whether doing virtual learning at home has affected them emotionally, 13 students strongly agreed, 4 students agreed, 4 students somewhat agreed, and then 1 student was neutral. And so most students strongly felt that returning home while doing virtual learning strongly emotionally affected them. In terms of interview questions, so I had an interview, and like I said, it was 20 to 30 minutes. It was 7 open-ended questions. I wanted to give them a chance to talk a little more about their personal experience. And I will go over the questions and the answers in the next slides. So interview results. The first question I asked was, how have you been continuing your education since moving to an online form while returning home? Some popular answers were, mostly mixture. Some classes were recording, some were live Zoom. Most students returned home to their family, bar that 1 student that chose to stay with friends. Some students did their work mostly in their bedroom, try to isolate themselves from their family because they felt that their family was oftentimes very distracting. Homework was online, usually through Moodle, but sometimes through other online forms as well. And then sometimes they had to print their homework out. This was an issue for some students who didn't have access to the best Wi-Fi or laptops or printers, so they had to email their professors and kind of wiggle their way around that. The second question I asked was, do you feel as if you are still able to actively learn in your home environment? If so, how have you been making sure you are as engaged and participating as much as possible while at home? So most students felt like they weren't able to fully learn while at home with virtual learning. Many students assumed responsibilities such as full-time jobs, taking care of siblings, etc. A lot of them try to set up a stable study space just so when they would go there to study or do schoolwork, they were in the right mindset. And then a lot of them attempted to have consistent study schedules. And a lot of students said this because they felt like if they established a schedule, when that time frame came in through the day, so it would be time for them to do their schoolwork, they said they'd feel more productive. And it just kind of kept a sense of normalcy in the middle of the pandemic. The third question is, how has being at home affected your ability to fully participate in school? So this is kind of a similar question to earlier, so there were a lot of similar answers. A lot of students said assuming responsibilities at home took away from being a full-time student, which is hard. Families expect a lot from their children, especially during this stressful time. At home, sometimes you feel a little bit more comfortable, more laid back, so a lot of students said it decreased their productivity. And then they said they felt less productive when they're not around your friends or not around their other students, and so they weren't in that academic mindset. And so that was another thing that decreased productivity for a lot of people. Fourth question I asked was, what has been the greatest differences between your experiences with online classes versus in-person classes? One difference was how students participated, and this was kind of different based off the professor or the class, but because it was over Zoom and sometimes synchronous, sometimes asynchronous, you weren't able to ask as many questions or go to office hours or do a lot of small group work. And so a lot of times students had to participate through Moodle or forums or other things of that sort, which they felt wasn't as effective. Workload was another difference. A lot of students said that they felt like they were getting more busy work from their professors because they felt like their professors just didn't know what to do. And so A lot of students complained about that. And then they just kind of felt less connected to the class because when you're inside like an in-person class, you're around other students, the teacher's right there. But when you're on a Zoom call, it's sometimes easy to mute yourself and then turn your camera off. We've all been there. So that was an issue for some students. And then also lectures were in a multitude of different forms. Some were asynchronous, some were synchronous, some class times changed. Sometimes it was different each day. So a lot of students just had trouble like keeping up with like what time class was or whether they had class today or not. So that was definitely another issue. The fifth question I asked was, what do you think teachers could have done differently to better accommodate yours and other students' needs? One big thing they said, this was probably the biggest thing they said, was extend deadlines and be more flexible with the quality of assignments and tests. This was a big one because obviously when we're home, we're not going to be able to do as much schoolwork as we would as if we were living on campus, being a full-time student. Another way they wanted something to change if virtual learning becomes a possibility or a reality next semester is offer multiple ways of participating. So as I said earlier, a lot of classes would only offer one way, whether it be through a Moodle forum or whether it be through emailing the professor or something like that. And so they wish that they could have multiple different ways to participate to fit people's schedules and styles. Another thing was pay for laptops and Wi-Fi for students that didn't have access to it. I know Center did this where I think they sent out laptops to students who didn't have any before, but there are still some students who didn't have access to laptops or printers or Wi-Fi, so they had to do everything on their phone and it was very difficult for them. Another really big thing was don't give out as much busy work. A lot of people said this, just try to keep the amount of work consistent but not too much, and don't give busy work, they said, if it wasn't necessary. And then another big thing was make all classes asynchronous to be more considerate for people in other time zones. This is one really big thing I heard because, I had people on the West Coast complaining about having to wake up at 5 a.m. for an 8 a.m. class, which sounds terrible. So I think that was another big thing that they wanted professors to do. The sixth question I asked was, how did moving to an online form affect you emotionally? So it affected most students a lot emotionally. It was a very quick transition, like 1 month we're kind of just chilling, and then the next month we're in the middle of a pandemic, we have to go home, we had like 2 days to get out, increased sadness, from feeling isolated from friends, you're very stressed because virtual learning, none of us had really done it before. Like I said, a lot of students had to assume more responsibilities at home, so that was another big issue. And then a lot of students just kind of felt less connected to everything because they weren't around their friends, they weren't doing really extracurriculars. They just kind of transitioned into just feeling less connected. And the final question I asked, which was the seventh question, is what do you think you have learned from being online in the spring? What do you think you will do differently as a student? And a lot of people said they learned how important it is to be with people, whether it be just studying or waving hi to people on the way to class or just being around students and other people kind of put you in an academic mindset. Another kind of offset of that is in-person classes kind of increase motivation to do more work because you're around students, so it's kind of motivating you. A lot of students learn they're not productive at home. High school was kind of college is a different ball game from high school, and so trying to do homework while at home can be very difficult. And then in terms of what they want to do differently as a student, a lot of people said they want to have a more consistent schedule, which makes sense because it was something they said they wanted. It was something they said that they did while they were home doing virtual learning that helped them a lot, kind of just maintain a sense of normalcy. They want to make sure to spend more time with other people and friends just because they realized how important human contact is and being sociable. And then they want to be more proactive with professors, which was a big thing because once they lost that ability to, talk to them after class or go to office hours whenever, they realized how important it was to go to these things consistently. Recommendations. So based off my findings and research, I have a few recommendations for students and teachers. I overwhelmingly found that students returning home and doing virtual learning really did affect their participation and engagement, so my hypothesis was correct. One recommendation I have for students, which is the biggest one, is just try to have as much collaboration with other students if virtual learning is a reality while we have to go home, if that is a reality next semester. whether it be Zoom study sessions or class group chats or something like that. Just make sure to consistently collaborate with other students to kind of put you in a more academic mindset. And then for professors and teachers, I'll just say be more flexible with your students. Extend deadlines if you have to. Let students participate in multiple different ways. Just be more flexible to your students' needs, because sometimes you never really know what's going on at home. So in terms of study limitations, I did have some of those for my research. I was only able to do traditional age college students because the IRB did not allow anyone to work with minors due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I wanted to work with, elementary school students and middle school students and high school students, but due to that rule, I was only able to work with college. Most of these students went to the same college, all but one attended Center College, so it wasn't that diverse of a sample size. And also, this is just hard to generalize for the entire United States. Like I said, all of us go to one college, like a small private college in Kentucky. This may not be applicable to someone who goes to a huge school in a big city like UCLA or NYU. So it's just hard to generalize. Like I said, everyone dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic differently, so you can't generalize. Another thing was I had to conduct all interviews over Zoom. It was good because if I wanted to interview people in different time zones or different states, I could. But for people I could interview in person, it was difficult because I couldn't read their body language because we were over a screen. And then if I do want to do research in the future, which I want to continue doing that, I would want to change all of that. So I want to get a more diverse sample size, work with more age groups, and then try to have more diverse of a sample size, as I just said. So in conclusion, going home and doing virtual learning was definitely an adjustment for all of us, regardless of your home situation. That being said, though, some students were more privileged, especially if they didn't have to do a full-time job or if they didn't have to assume a lot of responsibilities at home. It definitely made your adjustment easier if you were privileged in that way of not having to do that. I hope college students can see that they're not alone. Every student is going through the same, or at least most students are going through the same thing, to be honest. And at least for me personally, like hearing everybody's stories and like being able to relate to them helped me realize that I'm not alone. All students are going through this. Virtual learning was an adjustment for professors also. A lot of professors, especially at Center College, had never done virtual teaching before. So to just switch in the middle of the semester was kind of, very interesting. And then I just hope that professors can hopefully learn and adjust for next semester of virtual learning if it is a reality, and hopefully be a little more flexible. What's next? With the pandemic still occurring, I want to continue collecting data in the fall, so hopefully I'm still able to do that. With virtual learning being an anticipated reality for many colleges and many other places this semester, I kind of wonder, how will it differently be handled? Will people be better prepared now that they've had 5 months and are a little more adjusted to it, or will it turn out the same? As I said earlier, I want to hopefully have a larger sample size, and then I also want to provide more recommendations to students and professors. And that is it for my presentation. So thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.